Hey everyone, Corey Weathers here. I made a promise to you that I would do a video answering some of the questions that we didn't get to in our last Zoom call. And so first of all, I just want to say thank you for attending that Zoom call. It was such a joy to spend that time with you. So I'm a little casual today. It's a Friday. It's November 1st, and so gratitude is on my mind. Especially in an election year. I hope that this week starts for you some similar thoughts of how do we find our gratitude. It's a good month to do that. Maybe that's a good place to begin, which is your mind cannot hold both resentment or negative feelings and gratitude at the same time. There's plenty of research that shows that that's true. And so that's one of the reasons why starting November 1st today, I am just thinking on that and choosing gratitude wherever I can. So I am saying I'm grateful for you guys and thank you for your questions. I said I would address what questions we didn't address in the Zoom call separately in a recording. And so this is what that is. So I'm going to try to stay brief, but there's some great questions that you guys brought up. So bear with me as I kind of try to unpack some of these questions for you. But they're really, really good. So thank you for sending them in. Okay, so the first one, what's the most common misconception that you're still fighting against even after writing this mammoth of a resource? So true, it's a mammoth of a resource. That is a big question. The misconceptions, it depends on if they've read the book or not, right? If they haven't read the book, then we're still dealing with the issues of generational conflict. A lot of pointing fingers at Gen Z being the problem. No, the institution's the problem. No, America's the problem. So a lot of and somebody gets into a question later about why don't I address some of the political side of things? And so I try to remain as neutral as possible. I find that my role as a clinician, whether I'm working with a couple or working as a consultant with an organization and their constituents, or between, like on a team consulting or being the coordinator between two entities, my role and my job is to be as neutral as possible. And that also means seeing both sides. So that being said, I also get a lot of misconceptions or a lot of questions, or sometimes bumping into some of these challenges and belief systems about the military being woke, meaning, and what they ask and what they're thinking about that is their frustration about the military changing their standards and whether or not that is an appropriate response to the recruiting crisis. And so I can sometimes I've gotten labeled a couple times, or somebody has said that I myself must be woke because really it came down to because I was asking them to listen to the next generation, listen to Gen Z, and listen to what the younger generation is asking for. And just the very fact of me asking them to listen and asking us to bridge these divides, they misunderstood that that means that I am for one set of values over another. Hopefully, spending enough time with me, I think that person eventually saw that I'm for all of us. One of the phrases we use in our house a lot, especially if conflict comes up, is "I'm for us, not against us," or "I'm for you, not against you." Otherwise, if they've already read the book, the misconceptions um, are less, I would say, but really it is the biggest struggle that I think that I'm seeing right now is I mean, I had a spouse come up to me just a couple days ago. I was in DC and she said, I've read the book, I've listened to the podcast. Now what do I do? And she was asking a question about how to help evolve the spouse and family culture to whatever it is that needs to be new. And I think that's the biggest question that I'm getting is like, practically, what do we do from here? And although I have a lot of ideas and there's some things that I'm going to pilot in order to address some of those questions, before we can actually get to solutioning, what I am finding is that the older generation, and what I mean by older is older millennials and then Gen X and boomers, their struggle really is the need to grieve what they had in order to be willing to start something new. And sometimes starting something new brings in a little bit of what you knew, and what you knew works and what still is valuable. But being open to trying something different. But in order for us to do that, I'm finding that big, if you want to call it a misconception, the big thing is we have to grieve, and we have to acknowledge, and have to learn how to let go before we can start anything new. So that's the biggest, it's not necessarily a misconception, but it's definitely something I find myself fighting against. Okay. Can you please speak to how you are sharing this information with current military leaders as well as leaders in the veteran serving space? I think that I already shared that the book, I'm so grateful, is in both the an Air Force institution, it's in the Army War College, and a few other places as well. So I'm very pleased and grateful for that. I'm being asked to speak to military leaders of all ranks, both enlisted and officer, and in the policy spaces, both in the larger DoD military and family policy, as well as in the individual branches. So like Navy policy, that sort of thing. And so those that are making the decisions really want to culturally get this right. And then even having a chance to speak with some of the Secretary of Defense's staff after my last trip with them, and just building relationships with that office. They have copies of the book as well, and that's turned into some conversations that I'm grateful for. So the answer to that is everywhere I can, everywhere I can. All right. How do we help younger spouses take up the leadership mantle while both staying involved, but also staying further on the exterior to allow a new generation to create their own program or community? So really this question is about how do we pass the baton? I've been in this community long enough to see older generations literally throw the baton in frustration. I've seen them like hand the baton, but cling tightly and not let it go. So really, I think this is about, again, going back to that grief, back to your own processing. What does it mean to pass the baton to the next generation? So I think the first part of that question, how do we help younger spouses take up the leadership mantle? I think there's two answers to this. One, it is your willingness to see leadership potential in someone that might be less mature than you, and seeing their potential without the expectation for them to be at your standard of leadership. So in other words, do you see their potential and they're open to growth and they're open to learning, which means you need to be open to mentor. I know MSAN does a really good job with that. That's a big part of MSAN is mentoring. So your understanding and willingness and know-how when it comes to mentoring. But I think there's a great book that I'm reading right now called Falling Upward. It's about going into the second half of your life. It's a very powerful book. It's faith-based, but what I like about what he talks about is that the first half of your life is necessary, and we have to go through the first half of life of finding our identity, finding the rules, learning how to follow rules, learning how to be disciplined, how to have a job, how to lose a job, how to make friends, how to find a family, build a family, right? There's all these things that are very much to do. And then the second half of life is when you reach this point in transition, some would call it a midlife crisis, where you realize that all of that is well and good and necessary, but that it's not the place where we find joy. We find joy in it, but there you reach this point where you realize there's more than just the tasks. There's more than just the job. There's more than just forcing or expecting your spouse to do better or vice versa. There has to be something beyond that. And that is where we enter into the second half of life, where we find our wisdom. And part of our wisdom is being able to see that younger generation, that it's okay for them to be fighting for the things that they're fighting for, wanting everybody to play by the rules. And there's something about the second half of life that makes you want to, now knowing the purpose and the goodness of rules and structure, that you learn how and when you can break those rules. But if you flip that, right, you don't want to have in the first half of life everyone breaking the rules, because that's where things go off the rails. And so I guess what I'm saying here is part of mentoring and leading the next generation is recognizing that the younger generation might be stuck in some of those things that are really important to them that maybe you feel like is not as important, or maybe you feel like there are bigger things that are more important than what they are trying to wrestle down. And what I'm here to say is both are true. And can you see that both are true and necessary? And that younger generation that is fighting for something, wanting something, that it's okay for them to want to change the structure. You're there to offer the wisdom and see between the lines and help them see between the lines, and recognizing they may not be able to see that until they're in the second half of life. So part of that means you being patient. I interviewed a guy, Charles Vogel, who studies community building, and I asked him a question similar to this. And he talked about how important it is to be patient with that young generation who may not know the things that we know. And the only reason that we know those things is because we have a million reps of it. Like, how many coffees did you go to? How many FRGs did you go to? How many military balls have you gone to? Right. And you have all these reps, so you know how to do it. You know how to behave, or you know the etiquette or whatever. And recognizing that this new generation has not had the opportunity to have as many reps as we have. And so being patient as they learn, and be patient and careful in how you teach them, right? Okay, hopefully that's a sufficient answer. Do we think the scales have tipped too far socially within the force? Social conservatism versus modern individualistic issues that are taking up a ton of leadership issues and time. Do we think scales have tipped too far socially? I think my answer to that is it doesn't matter what my opinion is on that. It's happening, right? In some ways, it doesn't matter if it is, or if it's right, or if it's whatever. Society has become more, our nation, maybe even the globe, has become more individualistic in nature, and none of us have control over that. Although we have control in our homes and what we teach, and what we encourage, and who we are as leaders, and what we advocate and how we advocate. So we do have influence, but we don't have control. So the truth is, we are having to tend to, I think this is also a standards question. The real question, I think, here is, standards have changed, and some of those standards have changed because society has changed, and the DoD has to be in the business of selling this job. That's what recruitment is. Ever since the all-volunteer force kicked off, the DoD suddenly found itself having to sell the job, whereas the draft was like, we're just going to do what we're good at and train people to do what we're good at, and we'll pull from the nation. Now we have to sell it. So that means we have to sometimes, and we've been doing this since 1973, changing standards, evolving, changing how we market the business of joining the force. And so as society has become more individualistic, we have to, as the nation has changed and we are 1% of that of the nation, you're going to see us adjust a little bit, because we are getting people with different values coming into our force. And so that means we have to adjust. Now, I tell this to leaders all the time on the things that we cannot adjust on, things like, or maybe that we're not ready to adjust on. Like, it's one thing to adjust on beards. It's one thing to adjust on how we wear uniforms, or vaccines, or those kinds of things. But if we're not ready to, or don't see the value in changing standards around, let's say, selfless service, loyalty, duty, respect, honor, like those kinds of things, then I tell people evolve or educate. If you cannot evolve on it, then we need to educate it. And we might find ourselves having to educate the newer generation on things that they were not strongly educated, or did not get a lot of reps in the culture before they came into our culture. So that's where I'm seeing a lot of our leaders having to adjust a little bit, and have to teach some things that they didn't expect to have to teach on before. So how is the DoD or the government handling the shift of the older generation starting to lose trust and not encouraging their children and grandchildren to enlist or serve the government? Like, how can the DoD just turn a blind eye to this? Valid point. How are they handling the shift? I haven't heard from the institution or people that represent the institution on what they feel or whether or not they're addressing. My book largely signals to the institution that they need to tend to the cohort that is in desperate need of reconstitution and healing, and that should help with that. So those that are reading the book, I think, are definitely hearing that. Whether or not the institution is ready or knows how to take care of that cohort so that we get over or heal the disillusionment that we have a lot of those that are getting ready, let's say in the last 5 to 10 years of their 20-year career, let's say, who feel disillusioned and frustrated or exhausted. The question is, well, at least one of the things that I'm challenging those that I talk to is, how do we message mental health better? How do we encourage people to take leave time if they need to get the reconstitution? I'm sorry, not the reconstitution, the healing and respite that they need. And so that's where our job as leaders and advocates comes in is, instead of just expecting the institution to suddenly value a cohort that is technically aging out, even though they have great value because of the investment that's been put in them and they are current leaders. The institution is built to fight and win nations' wars, which largely falls on the 88% of the younger generation that are those willing and able bodies, right? So I am trying to encourage one leader at a time, if that's what it takes, to make sure that you are tending to that cohort that needs that healing. That means that if you guys as leaders find yourself even with spouse groups, those spouses, those wives, since the majority of them are women, are in desperate need of healing. And when you heal one part of the family, they go home and take an opportunity to heal their family, right? So you never know what kind of influence you have and the ripple effect that you have on tending to those who need that healing. Okay. Would it be better for recruitment to raise military pay to a competitive wage versus offering quality of life programs? I think what we're seeing is both. The Secretary of Defense just recently pushed out that they are working to continue to raise pay across the board, making sure that everyone, especially our enlisted, know about the basic needs allowance that can bring their income to, I believe it's 150% above the poverty line if they're struggling. So we're already seeing them trying to address that, versus offering quality of life programs. You know, I can't, I would have to do some research on this, but I think you see things ebb and flow. On one hand, they might shift for a little bit in one NDAA or several NDAAs where they're focusing towards really on the benefits, the pay, the making sure that we're doing right by what we're promising. And then you might see a shift then in family programming, making sure that we address the programs, that we have the support for families that actually need it. But whichever way is better to recruit people in. Obviously, Gen Z is looking for not only financial security, so going to your question on pay, that is really helpful, but they're also really focused and care a lot about quality of life. So both of those things are going to be important for recruitment. But just remember, keep in mind that following the money chapter is really there to help you understand that regardless of what the institution wants to do, they cannot do it if Congress doesn't give them the money to do it. And so that's why it slows down, is really it has to come from Congress to do it. Okay. Moving along, just a few more. The dysfunction caused by continuing resolutions adds another layer of complication to even the best planned budgets. The DoD is beholden to the problems that Congress creates when Congress fails to agree on budgets and kicks the can down the road by delaying necessary purchases. Our entire country delays progress and existing programs because of continuing resolutions. Our choice of elected officials is among the most impactful civic exercises we can engage in. We can hold our elected officials accountable. What was your thought process in discussing or not discussing political involvement? So I hope that you read in the book that there are various points where I am encouraging people to understand, especially through following the money, that, and in the podcast, there's a podcast, especially on I believe it is where I interview Nordy and Susie Schwartz, where we talk about why, how all of us want to point fingers, understandably so, to our top leaders, and how when you ask them, those that are in those top positions, what it's like to be at their level, they have a boss that they answer to, right? And if you follow that logic, really, you go to Congress, then you go to the administration, then you go to, guess what? It circles back to us, the American people who have the ability to vote or not vote. And so that is an important thing for us to remember, that as we hold our elected officials accountable, I do write about, at least I try to hint about throughout the book, and I definitely cover it in the podcast as well, that we can point fingers all day long, but really, most of this comes back to us as Americans voting. And this is, I guess, a timely question. This is a timely question to be answering right now. So going back to what I said in the beginning, I know that if I get into a conversation about politics, especially, number one, that's not my calling, is to make things political and to address things politically. We talked about at the end of our conversation, my secret sauce, if you will, my calling is to serve whoever is in front of me, whether they are Democrat, Republican, and even whether that person in front of me has made some really terrible decisions in leadership. My role, as I see it personally, and you have to decide what your role is, my role is to serve that person. Sometimes that person is struggling with some of the decisions they've made, and I'm going to go into my clinical role, if you will, and tend to the wounds that they're feeling so that they can be a more effective leader. And so I don't get into heavy politics either way. Sorry about that. A lot of talking here. I try not to get into a lot of politics here because I don't want the audience that I'm talking to be skewed by what my political affiliation is. Sorry, I had to take a sip of water there. I don't want to we have so much political division right now. If I start getting into, and we see it every day, if I start getting into politics, I can lose the reader and I can lose the audience. And I'm here to build bridges and speak a higher level truth so that they can apply that information to their political, if they feel led to do anything politically, especially to vote, that they can apply that information by taking that seat at the table and having that information be a bridge builder. But also, if that also means casting their vote or talking to someone, or if your role is to really get involved in politics, that you're more informed with a more neutral truth to do that. So I do get asked sometimes why I'm not more politically leaning one way or the other. But I hope that you do see that very much of what we talk about in the book is so many leaders within our force have to be apolitical. So this book was not going to help anybody make any clear solutions if they are apolitical and can't do anything politically within their roles. But I did want to educate them on the political system so that if they can create understanding to teach that to other people that they are leading, that really it trickles down to the most important thing that we can do is vote. And like you said, hold our elected officials accountable through our votes. But as advocates, if that's something that you feel like you can do, then you might find yourself being more vocal politically. Whereas I found going to a higher level of thinking allows the reader to read between the lines and apply it to their own involvement in politics. I hope I answered that question okay. I obviously have my own opinions on that, on different subjects, but that is not what I'm commonly asked about specifically. I'm more so asked about, how do I survive? How do I be a strong leader? How do I continue to advocate as a leader despite the politics around me? But I will say, I will give you this one little bit. There are lots of ways to hold your officials accountable. For the average American, it's voting, right? Some you are more of an activist and you can do protesting, that sort of thing. The way I see the best way to hold officials accountable is by me being educated, me being educated on what they need to be educated on, and to be that servant that reflects as a mirror to them. This is what either you said you would do, or this is what you said was important to you. And I am bringing the information to help you do as best of a job as you can at this thing that you said that you promised you would do. And I'm here to help you do that well. And sometimes just by participating that way and being a servant, by knowing what that person is, or at least said that they were passionate about, and bringing that information almost like a staffer to help them with it, it also holds them accountable on whether or not they're actually doing well in it, right? Without you even saying you're doing well, you're not doing well. You'd be surprised on how much serving someone and helping them succeed at the things they said they wanted to succeed at not only helps you build relationships, but also is a kind way to hold someone accountable as well. So that's just a little side thought on that. Let's see. Your book covers so much that I, as a spouse and as a leader, can relate to. Geobatching is my biggest issue, and finding family balance is where I had questions. So I'm not sure what your exact question is. We only have a couple questions left here, but I will say we are seeing geobatching be more of a solution than ever. That makes me really sad because I am all for families staying intact. But I think that when a family is especially going through a financial crisis, medical crisis, or other kind of crisis, sometimes geobatching is something that we temporarily have to do. My biggest warning to families on geobatching is to be careful to not do it out of resentment. Be careful to not do it because it's easier than working on your marriage. And to also remember, because we have been in a situation where you almost did have to geobatch. I can tell you, as a mom I'm about to launch my second kid into college. I can tell you the number of times out of fear we have almost had to do something for our kids because we were worried about their mental health, and we were worried about asking them to do another hard thing. I will say the hard things did teach my kids how to go into college stronger and more socially prepared. And I will also say we have also made good decisions along the way where we needed to consider the mental health needs of our kids first. And we did that as a couple. So I'm not sure what your biggest issue or your question was about geobatching or finding family balance, but I'm hoping that this big answer of, number one, try not to ever pull your family apart if it's due to resentment, if it's due to pride. So many spouses I hear will say, I'm ready for you to revolve your life around me, or it's about me for a change. There's nothing wrong with you taking care of yourself, pursuing your passion, finding your identity, and using your talents for good. It's never healthy or good for a marriage for one partner, unless it's agreed upon for a season, especially, to force everybody to revolve around them to the point that it causes destruction. And so be careful to not, this is my warning to all spouses, be careful to not, out of resentment, flip things upside down because we've earned it or deserve it. Those that deserved language is a slippery slope. And so my hope is that you make decisions because you have ruled out every other option, and you as a couple have made this decision and have a plan to stay connected as a family. And that we're not making those decisions because we're hitting an easy button, or because it's out of entitlement or pride or resentment. So hopefully that's helpful, at least helpful for if you talk with someone else who's considering that same choice. Okay, 2 more questions, I believe. As a millennial, I'd love to hear more about how to bridge gaps with boomers when we run into roadblocks. I'll try to answer this one fast because I think I touched on it in our meeting. I would say, number one, be open-minded, that none of the generations are trying to purposefully hurt each other or purposefully push each other away. A lot of it is misunderstanding. A lot of it is fear of seeing things change, or it's just not knowing what we should do different. Everybody's kind of in a place of paralysis. So as a millennial, I would say, be cautious in the number of why questions you're asking. You because Y comes across to those who've boomers and Generation X who have not quite learned about millennials, although I think that this is really changing in a good way. I think we're kind of figuring it out. It has in the past come across as disrespectful and just questioning, whereas millennials were taught to question and that can be respectful. So here's a little tip that you can use. Um, Start with complimenting. This really works in marriage too, by the way, or with your kids or any hard conversation. Starts really well with first a compliment. Um, Thank you for what you've always done. Thank you for what you've passed down to us. I'm really struggling. Here's where I go from compliment to the topic. I'm really struggling with, I'm going to make something up, with shifting family readiness groups and trying to do something new because nobody's showing up for them. And I don't know what to do. So I'm coming to you. Here's the question, right? Coming to you and want to gain your wisdom. What did you feel like worked before? Why did it work? And what do you feel is no longer working? So notice I'm asking them a question, which is a signal to them that you respect them, a signal, kind of like a signal to your elder that they have wisdom to offer. Um, it allows them to step into that place of wisdom that they feel that they've earned and that they probably have earned, and it gives them a chance to share that and feel valued for that. And then I think that you can start to enter into more of a dialogue of um, why you feel like something isn't working and how would they feel if you tried this instead? And what are your concerns about? Like, I had one millennial spouse that reached out to me for coaching one time who wanted to do something simple like meeting at like a, it was like a, it wasn't like a, it wasn't one of those paint and wine things, but it was like, we're going to make cookies and it was in a, but it wasn't like someone's house and it wasn't somebody making a meal. Right. And so the older generation was really frustrated that she was trying to do something new. And it was supposed to be loud and multi-sensory. And so there was a generational conflict. And instead of her just kind of plowing through and doing what she wanted to do, even though the numbers were going to be great, we talked a lot about how does she encourage and bring them in and help them understand. And in order to do that, we've got to give that older generation a chance to transition. So those conversations, those respectful conversations can invite them to transition, show them your heart, show them what you're trying to do, show them the blocks and the obstacles that you've hit and why this is causing you to try to want something new. And ask them flat out, like, I can sense that you're struggling with me and struggling in the direction that I want to go. Can you talk with me and share with me about what it is that I'm doing? Um, I'm asking for your feedback, right? Of what I'm doing that is causing those roadblocks or those relationship blocks. And I think you'll be surprised. It invites people into a more vulnerable place. So hopefully that's helpful. Okay, last question. What if you've already, I love this question. It's a great one to end on. What if you've already stormed the gates, hurt some feelings, or upset the apple cart? How do you make amends and move forward? What a phenomenal question. All of us have been there in our passion, in our frustration, in our hurt, in our pain. Most advocates are born out of your own pain and your own experiences. Of oppression a lot of times. And so all of us have had those moments where we've stormed the gates. First of all, I'm going to start with this. If you are tempted to storm the gates, give yourself a 24 to 48 hour hold before you actually execute. We find often that we gain clarity once we sleep on it, once we've journaled on it. So I'm encouraging you to do that first. Sometimes you will find clarity. I've written things so many times that the next day I realized, oh, that was just my first draft. The deeper, more truthful message that would actually be better received ends up being my third or fourth draft. Um, I've also written things and put it out so quickly. I remember I wrote an article right during the Afghanistan withdrawal, and it was published as an op-ed. And within 24 hours, I asked them to take it down because it was not the right time to say it. And of course, it was an op-ed, and it was going to get a lot of clicks, and it did not get taken down. So I wasn't wrong in what I was saying, but the timing was not great. And so it was not well received. And so we've all been there. So I think, first of all, own it. If you have done that and you could have done better, always own it. Go to the person, and you'll find by the end of the book, I mention in the book about that article that I wrote that I could not retract. And I own in the book that it was not the right timing. That's part of my way of owning it publicly. Um, and showing that I can be humble, especially when I get it wrong. Um, it's never too late to do that. If you really feel like you could have done something better, had a conversation that was better, started a conversation better, as soon as you feel that way, don't come out bleeding and super insecure with it, right? Meaning, I'm so sorry, I'm an idiot, like I shouldn't have done that. And also, don't get into the weeds. Like, don't do something silly like, oh my gosh, I should have opened the door for you. I'm making this up, right? I should have opened the door for you. And I took, like, the little tiny things are not as important as much as your heart, your words, your tone, how you ended something. Even last month, I had an interaction with a friend of mine, not a deep friend of mine, but like an acquaintance, where more than an acquaintance, but you'll know what I mean, where we had a little bit of a conversation interaction. My husband was with me. We kind of were like, we're going opposite directions. And so my husband and I then kept walking, and my husband looked at me and said, well, that was rude at me of what I had said. And I was like, what? What did I say? And he was like, you said da 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 da. And I bet she heard it this way. Y'all, I'm not kidding. We were in the middle of like a very big public space. I pivoted and I ran in my heels, literally ran in my heels to catch up with her to set and to make it right. And I chased her down and I said, I am so sorry. My husband said that what I said might have come across rude, and that is not at all what I meant. I am so sorry if it came across that way. And she was like, it didn't. Like, she's like, I didn't even think about that. But um, me maintaining my intention, but also my reputation to make sure that I did right. If somebody brings something to me, I'm going to try to do that right. So own it publicly if you have to. Send an email, make a phone call. If you've like Capitol Hill, even on that level, reach out to a staffer and just say, hey, I realized last year I really came in with a storming the hill kind of attitude, and realized looking back that that was not as productive as I could have been. And I would like to do something different this year. This year, I would like to show up informed. I would like to show up helpful. I would like to partner with you instead of storming your office. And so if you would be willing to give me another chance, I would really like to help you succeed at these initiatives that are also very important to me. Um, and then I would model that. Even if you don't hear from them, I think I would either send them information or set up another opportunity to go in with a different posture, going in and showing them that you can actually do what you said that you want to do, which is, again, now I'm in person. Thank you for giving the opportunity to see me again. I recognize I could have been more productive last time. I'd love to, these topics are the ones that I wanted to spend our time on today. Before I jump into that, though, I would love to know, how can I be most helpful? How can I be an asset to you as a military spouse who is in this community, who sees these issues played out every single day, boots on the ground, and might even have some connections to some other entities, and some understanding of the system? How can I best help you succeed at this? That would be my first question. And even if they say, I don't know, I got nothing, great. Now we move on to you showing them, here's a couple of things that I'd like to bring to you that I think would inform and help the direction that you're going. I've already read the bill. I've already read the initiative. I've already read some of the comments that the representative has made, and what they're trying to accomplish. And so here's a couple of things that I can go deeper on that I know we don't have time for, that if any of these topics could be useful for you, I'd be more than happy to share that with you and give you some education on it, or even help you communicate it if that's what you need help with. So Here is my one sheet. If you need to reflect back on it later, I'm also going to email it to you after I leave so that you have access to it digitally. But thank you so much for giving me a second chance. Do you hear how that heart posture is so much different? So own it, be different, learn and grow, show people that you're always willing to learn and grow. But here's what I think I'm going to close on. My most visual storming the gates, if you will, is my TRICARE video that went kind of viral in 2019. I shared with you a little bit about that. So I'll just share in closing. I knew that that was my last ditch effort to make an impact on that topic. I had talked to everybody I could talk to. I had done all the research I could do. I had hit every roadblock, and it felt like there was nowhere else to go. So I had done my due diligence before I was ever ready to storm the gates. And so I also made that video humorous, so that it wasn't just me being angry and passionate, but that I also brought in the humor to keep the person watching the video, number one, but number two, to highlight how ridiculous it was for someone to have to go through what I was going through as a licensed professional counselor and a spouse. And so as soon as I posted that video, I had two senior leaders contact me, spouses. One called me and said, Corey, take it down. Take it down. This is not what we do. This is not how we do it. You didn't offer any solutions. You just can't put a video out angry. And I got insecure for a second. And my answer to her was, I don't have any other options. While you as a senior leader could probably walk into the Pentagon or a conference room and have influence and impact, I don't. And there are thousands of other spouses that are having the same exact experience I'm having. And the people that need to be making these decisions aren't answering. And so this is what I have to do. There's no other options for me. And I had to say no to that spouse leader. And so part of what I'm saying to you right now is sometimes it is the right thing to do. Pause, think on it, give yourself 24 to 48 hours, but you'll know if it's the right thing to do, if you can do it professionally. The second senior spouse that contacted me reached out and said, I'm so proud of you. And that was a game changer for me. It was the permission that I needed to know I wasn't in trouble, that I was using my voice in a way that was productive. So just know, storming the castle can, first of all, feel right in our gut if it's the right thing to do. Doing things out of pure emotion is not a good enough reason to do it. Doing it because you have the emotion that has been tempered, plus evidence of how much it's impacting other people, plus you've done your homework, plus there's no other options. Those are all boxes to check to go, this could be a good reason for me to do it and do it this way. But having the blessing of someone else to say, this is a professional, productive way to do it is always a good sign. So that was a lot to give you guys. Thank you for listening. If you watched this all the way through, hopefully some of that is helpful. Thank you for the great questions. I'm so proud of each and every one of you, and so grateful for the work that you're doing in the individual things that you are passionate about. Reach out to mentors to find out if anybody else in the space is maybe 3 steps ahead of you that can save you from doing something that you then have to apologize for. There's lots of people trying to do those things who would welcome mentoring you if that's what you need. We all do this together. We don't do it alone. So I hope you guys have a great day, a great rest of your week. Thank you for your great questions, and thank you so much for listening. So have a great day, guys.